Over the last month, Cardano has been on a tear, moving up from a low of 30 cents to well above $1, peaking at $1.30. In this video, we're going to talk about where Cardano could be headed next based on what it's done in the past. Now, quickly, I do want to say I'm sorry if my voice sounds a little strange. I'm a bit under the weather at the moment, but hopefully over the next few videos, I should be back sounding how I usually do. I also want to say a huge thank you to everyone who left comments and watched my videos over the last month. I've been gone for a while, and that's because I had commitments and responsibilities that left me with no spare time. And these videos often take 3 or 4 hours to make, and I just didn't have that time. I could have probably made videos over the space of a week, but in the crypto space, that would be close to pointless because the information that I would be talking about in the video after a week could be totally invalid. So instead, I just focused on what I needed to. Anyway, with that said, let's get straight into the video. Now, last time we looked at Cardano, we emphasized a lot the similarities between 2019 and what we were seeing at the time in 2024. And these moves really did play out very similarly. If we zoom in, we can see the duration that we spent going up was about 29 weeks, and the pattern that we followed, kind of a double top towards the end, was more or less exactly what we saw in 2023, 2024. Where we had 26 weeks going up instead of 29, and we had this pattern of a double top. So the only slight variation is that the percentage move was lower, and the duration was also lower. This shorter and less is worth keeping in mind, as we'll see this happen again quite a bit. After we peaked out in March, we then spent 33 weeks going down, bottoming out at the start of August, even though we basically stayed at these lows all the way up until the beginning of November. Again, similar enough back in 2019, 37 weeks instead of 33, so less. Now, the seasonality is different. For 2019, we can see we bottomed out here in December. So compared to August before, we can't really compare. But if we take a different look at it and see, 25 weeks after we put in the top, we bottomed out. If we go back, we can see I haven't updated this, but it was 21 weeks after we topped out that we bottomed out. So we can see Cardano has become much shorter and less volatile in its price movements, at least over this last year. Even just small metrics like the first low to the second low, 18% here, last cycle, 20.6% here. So it just seems like everything is reducing. And again, the overall time that we spent in this period was 66 weeks before we moved into extremely bullish territory, 66 weeks back in 2019. Here we've been 59 weeks. And I think a move like this, a 4x over the space of 5 weeks, I don't know about you, I think that's extremely bullish. And I think that's a pretty clear signal that things are heating up. And I think it's a pretty clear end to this kind of mediocre price movement that we've seen with Cardano, at least hopefully an end to the bearish price action that we've seen with Cardano basically since the beginning of 2022. And funnily enough, we're actually now back at those prices. Where we started 2022 is where we are more or less now. So if we are seeing this play out again, what happened in 2019 and 2020, if we are seeing this play out again, what potentially could we expect to happen over the next few months? Well, if we just copy and paste what we got here and bring it over, you could make the assumption that we're due a much stronger rally over the next 3 or 4 months. And you might not necessarily be incorrect with that. But one caveat I'd like to point out is back in 2019, or 2020, sorry, we of course had the COVID scare. And over the space of 3 weeks, Cardano dropped about 66%, I think. Further, 75%. I would argue that Cardano was probably rallying here. This was the start of the bull run. If we bring this back to before kind of the first green, we get 27 weeks. Similar enough time frame to what we got here. You could argue that this would have just been our bull run. We had a longer period here, shorter period here, more or less matches up the same, similar enough to what we got here. Again, if we bring this back as well, it's going to be 56 weeks compared to our 59 weeks that we got here. Two very similar cases. I would argue this would have just been our bull run. COVID brought the price right back down. And I think this allowed Cardano to really rally up. If we didn't get this scare, I don't think Cardano would have got, a 700% move. I don't think it would have, if COVID scare didn't happen, I don't think we would have seen 7%, 700% of a move from here. So what might be worth doing is actually bringing this low up to where we were before we got the COVID scare that brought us that extra leg down. And you can see that adds up to about a 380% move. If I now clone this and bring it over to what we've currently seen, I'll just get rid of this guy first. You can see that's actually a lot more similar to what we've seen so far. And again, going back to this less volatile, shorter time period Cardano, you might want to bring this down to something like 15 weeks, and you might want to bring it down to the local top that we had here, which would be about 320% of a move. If it's going to follow the same way that it does here, where we get this first rally, bit of a pullback, and a second rally, I think this is probably the most realistic. Maybe we might get another a push to the upside this week or next week, but to be honest with you, I would argue against that, because if you take a look at any December, basically, for Cardano, literally any December, we can go through them all here, with the first December being the exception, but even then, you always get a red week towards the end or mid-December, almost always. In 2017, we got this red week mid-late December. In 2019, we got this red week, big red week, basically at the start of the year, end of December. We got a smaller one here, but there is usually some kind of correction in December, and at best, it usually trades sideways. 2020, all of December was red, more or less. 2021 was green, to be fair, but that was also mid-bull run. So you could make the case that hopefully we'll be mid-bull run at this point as well. We won't have a red December, but I don't know. I would be on the fence about it. 2022, December time, red. 2022, sorry, this is 2021. 2022, red, all red, basically, and 2023 as well. Big red week towards the end. I think we will probably see something like that happen. Second week of December now, we've had a really, really strong red candle where we wicked down as low as 92 cents. Now the next week that comes might be green, but the week after that it could be red as well. What I'm saying is we're not going to see anything crazy happen until January, in my opinion, most likely. And again, if we are to follow what we got last cycle, or at least what we're comparing to at the moment, kind of mid-2020 timeframe, you can expect, again, assuming that it's going to play out the same, which very rarely ever does, we didn't start our kind of rally 9 weeks after we peaked. So if you want to assume this is your peak, I would assume it isn't. I would say we'll probably get one little push higher maybe. But assuming this is your peak, we're not starting our rally until February 3rd, the week of February 3rd. And then we're starting our rally, and then we're seeing something like this play out. But again, there's a lot of assumptions there. There's a lot of variables there that necessarily don't look like they're going to play out. I would be inclined to take everything with a pinch of salt, but again, December time, not necessarily great for Cardano. 4 out of 5 times, it's mediocre or red. So assuming that we get basically this play out and that we've put in our local top, we get a 50% drop from our local top here. We'll check this out quickly, which brings us down to 66 cents for Cardano. This is on the table if it is going to potentially play out like this. And again, this was in a much healthier monetary environment. So if it can happen in ideal monetary environment, it can definitely happen in non-ideal monetary environment where rates are still high. We haven't seen QE yet. 50% drop is still on the table. So again, I want to emphasize this less for shorter kind of deal. If we take it from 66, 67 cents, it's not really too important. What can you expect from Cardano? Well, if it wants to return to the all-time high, it needs to make another 300% move from that low. If you think it's just going to go up only from current price, it needs to make a 170% move, 180% move, so close to a 3x. In terms of where we could see Cardano go, you shrink this down, a very bullish case might be drawing a line like this from the previous peaks. Very simple. You know, there's no complex maths going on here, just drawing a line from peak to peak, assuming that we get the high around June, which is possible. You could see a $6 Cardano, which again is about a 2x from its previous all-time high. So from current price, that would be a move of 500%, which is very strong. 6x basically. True altcoin season, like we saw here, this was a 4,000% move. We're basically getting a tenth of that here, and it's still rocketing the price up. And taking that from the low, from this cycle, say if you timed it perfectly, bought at the very lowest point, sold at the very peak, if it does go to kind of that high $6 range, that would still be a 3,000% move, which is unbelievable. You're looking at over a 30x, which is straight up life-changing money. But of course, again, that's on a lot of assumptions, on a lot of things that in no way have to play out at all. Either way, I don't think there's any more that I really need to say for the US dollar pair, but I do think good times are ahead, and they are close. Anyway, looking at the Bitcoin chart. Now, similarly to the US dollar chart, the Bitcoin Cardano pair is also slightly right translated, meaning that the 4-year cycle that is often held true for crypto, I think is slightly out of sync for the comparison that we're going to make. Again, I'm not saying I'm correct. This is just the view that I'm taking. So again, starting our comparison, we're looking at 2019, end of 2018, and comparing it to end of 2023, start of 2024. And again, this less volatility, shorter time frame plays through into the Bitcoin pair as well. So that we can see in 2019, we got a 134% move from this low to the high. And note that we bottomed out, we came to this low, we came to the same low in 2023, end of 2023. It was the same price basically. And we got a similar move. We got a first leg up, a little bit of a sell-off / consolidation, and a second leg up to the high. We got the same thing here. First leg up, a bit of a sell-off, second high. From that high, we then basically spent a year going down. And that came to a drop of about 77% to not even the complete low, but just the low that we kept returning to and bouncing off. We didn't have a close below 400 sats, but we wicked below it at points. And again, similar story here, back in 2024, like we're not currently in 2024. Back at the start of 2024 or end of 2023, we spent 46 weeks going down. So again, less time frame. We also moved down less. We moved down 70% instead of the 78% that we saw back in 2020. Note, again, of course, because the percentage is less, we didn't come down to this range that we previously bottomed out at and kept holding as a support for basically a year. We didn't actually see anything like that at all this cycle. We kept putting in lower lows slowly over that time frame instead of basically bottoming out in 20 weeks and then staying at that low for another 30 weeks before finally moving up. Here we just went down slow and steady until we finally got this strong move to the upside, a 200% move from low to high, very similar to the 260% move that we got back in July of 2020. Now again, you could make a bit of a case here because this kind of 2 months here, nothing really happened. You could shorten this to here and basically get a 200% move like we saw in the last 2 months, play out over a similar time frame. This was 10 weeks, I think, here from this low to this high. Here, we're currently on week 6. We could very easily move up higher again, but we did see towards the end of this rally back in 2020, we made a wick close to the high, spent a bit of time below it 1 week, and then we came back up, put in a slightly higher high, and then traded down for 23 weeks. And again, we dropped an additional 70%. Now, I'm not saying that has to happen, but I wouldn't totally disregard it and say we cannot get a downside move. I think we could very well see some kind of a correction. Doesn't have to be a 70% drop. Doesn't have to last for 23 weeks. But I'm saying we've made this move so far in 6 weeks. Maybe week 7, we put in a slightly higher high. And then for maybe 5 or 6 weeks after that, we trade down. Okay, we're doing a bit of gymnastics here. But if we bring this back to this low here, that's about 21 weeks from this low to this high. So you could argue that we spent basically the same amount of time going up as we did going down. If it takes us 7 weeks here to move up, you could argue that we have 7 weeks going down. If we have 7 weeks from, let's give it 1 week extra for week 7, 7 weeks going down, we might see a 40% drop at the start of February. So it's not impossible for us to have a really bad January. Because it's basically happened before. Now, it wasn't January when we had this correction. It was literally as far away as you could be from January. It was July. But you could argue that we're basically at this point in the cycle because of everything that's happened before being so similar. Now, another little comparison that's interesting is how long it took us to bottom out after the halving. You can see it was 32 weeks here back in 2020. Here, it took us 27 weeks. Or sorry, 28 weeks. Slightly wrong. So there is a case to be made, depending on how you want to look at it. You can say, oh, we're following after the halving. So we're at this point now, or we were at this point 6 weeks ago, and now we're seeing this play out. Or you can say, no, everything leading up to this point has played out basically the same over the last 2 years, 3 years even, realistically. Why would it not continue to play out the same way? That's a question you have to answer for yourself, but we're going to explore both outcomes anyway, again, assuming that it will play out like it did in 2020, 2021. So doing the easy one first, if you think we are here, if you're judging it off post-halving, how long it took for us to bottom after the halving, 32 weeks, we saw a move of 1,100%, a 12x against Bitcoin, and that took approximately 37 weeks. If you want to assume that this low is equal to this low here, and we take 37 weeks at 150%, 37 weeks. Now, I did slightly overestimate that, so that's about 34, 33 weeks realistically. But that puts us, it means we will have peaked by July 21st. Now, if you're going to try guess it to the week, you'd be looking at end of June. If you want to assume that, again, like we've seen across all of Cardano's charts for the last 2 years, things are going to take a shorter amount of time and it's going to be less volatile. You might want to take a few weeks off and bring it down a bit. We might come up to 5,500 Satoshis. We might top out beginning of May. Again, last cycle we topped out against Bitcoin start of September, basically. So there's a seasonality case there that you might want to make, saying, no, Cardano will most likely top out Q3. Realistically, there's no way of knowing for sure. Anyway, if you're assuming that we're following how we've played out and that we're currently in this second leg up, this 200% move type of range, and that say we'll top out in a few weeks, because even though we're going for the shorter and less, we're still not even halfway through the duration of this move, unless you want to argue it's from here, which is also a very valid point. I'll just take it from the top, assuming that we get 27 days from this current top. That brings us to June 9th, the week June 9th in 2025, when we bottom out. So already we're halfway through the post-halving year, which is historically the Bullrun year. And then assuming that we get some kind of a sell-off and say we're down at 800 Satoshis, that's just a guesstimate. And how long do we go up for? Again, 35 weeks, give or take, is when we top out. 35 weeks from the week of June 9th, moving up over 1,000%. We're basically going to struggle to fit this on the chart, but we're going to be at around 10,000 Satoshis. Not far away from an actual Bitcoin, which is crazy to think about. I don't know if I believe this scenario is going to play out. Again, you can go for the less is more. You might want to bring that down to something like 8,500 Satoshis. It's still a big move up from the previous 6,000 Satoshis. But you can make the case that technically we had a higher low this cycle after the halving, you could very reasonably make the assumption that we'll also get a higher high. Although, again, looking at Cardano's previous highs, it does seem to kind of, it's a pretty straight line to me. Cardano would be making a very different move compared to what it's previously done in terms of all-time highs, because it basically came to the same price in the last two cycles. For it to suddenly move 25% higher, it's not impossible. I would doubt, to be honest with you. Either way, I've kind of given you two scenarios. Me personally, I'd actually more lean towards the halving side of things. I think in terms of time frame, that plays out much better. I think as well, the crypto space will kind of stick to a 4-year cycle, but I think what we'll see in those 4 years will vary. This last cycle, we had an extremely long bear market, basically. Whereas historically, we've seen what you'd call a major and a minor bull run. We get like the minor bull run more or less 2 years after the major bull run. This year, we didn't really get that. We got arguably a minor bull run in March, but that was very late, very late. I think we're going to see that play out over the next few decades with crypto. I think we're going to see somewhat of a stick to the 4-year cycle. I think the gains are going to reduce drastically, but I think we're going to see it stick roughly to the 4-year cycle, but only in terms of these things more or less happen within the 4 years, but there's no real way of knowing when they're going to happen. I think it's almost like a checklist and say 5 out of the 8 things are ticked every cycle, but you don't know when they're going to be ticked. I think that's how crypto will play out. But anyway, that's like very random, to be honest with you. Anyway, that's the video, guys. I've probably gone on for way too long. If you liked the video, please leave a like. Helps out a load. Also consider subscribing because that helps out too, obviously. Thanks so much, guys. Take care and peace.